Hey everyone, it's Darren. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about a fairly simple topic, which is cell addressing. But I'm guessing there's some pieces of cell addressing you may not actually know. We're going to talk about single cells as well as ranges. And we're going to also talk about relative, absolute, indirect, and finally random cell addressing. And each of those has different uses. They're all very useful. The main one you're going to use, of course, is relative addressing. And the way that works is just this. So if we come in here and I do equals A1, that's a relative address. That says uh, go over to column A, row 1, and give me the result. So that's how you normally address things, okay? And what if you want to reference something from a different sheet? Well, that's just one step up. All you have to do is put in the sheet name, an exclamation point, and then the A1 or whatever. And that says, come over here to the planet sheet and get what's in A1. Okay, so this is all relative addressing, and it works pretty well. And it's pretty straightforward. Let's go back to just A1 here. So if we take this and we copy it down, of course, A1, you go down, turns to A2, turns to A3, turns to A4. You take these and you copy them one to the right. Now it's B1, B2, B3. And as long as you structure your spreadsheets reasonably well, this can save you a lot of time. You don't have to retype every formula with every row or every column. You can just copy it across, maybe change something minor. And this is the normal stuff we do. But what if, for example, we had a number like, well, let's just go ahead and get rid of this to avoid confusion. So what if I have a number like 2 that's over here? And I want to divide each of these numbers in column C by that value 2. Okay, well, that's easy. So it's just C1 divided by F1, and I get half. Okay, so let me just copy this down. Okay, now you have an error. And the reason is this is C1 divided by F1, but this one is C2 divided by F2. And I take 2 divided by 0. Can't do that. Okay, and that's where the next piece comes in, and that is absolute addressing. So the absolute addressing is also really simple. You just have to use a dollar sign. So there are two places you can put the dollar sign here. You can either put it before the letter or before the number. So or you can actually do both. And whichever one you do, it will lock that value. So now if I copy this down, see it's doing C1 divided by F1, C2 divided by F1, C3 divided by F1, C4 divided by F1. You do need to remember to put it before the part of the address you want to lock. Because if I just did $F1, that would still give me an error. On the other hand, if I did $1, it's still fine. So that's absolute addressing. Those are the two you're typically going to use. Okay, well, what about indirect? Indirect is a little bit different. Let's get rid of these again. For indirect, what you're doing is you're not saying, I want to go to this column and this row. You're saying, I want to go over to this other cell over here or something that I'm building. That's going to tell you where to go. And that sounds a little confusing, but let me show you how it works. So I'm going to put in a cell reference here. I'm going to put in A1. And this is the most simple form of indirect. So then I'm just going to do indirect of E1. And that tells me red. So what's this actually doing? Well, if you look here, I have indirect and then E1. So the first thing it does is it goes over to E1 and it says, what is in E1? Oh, I see A1 is in E1. So now it knows I'm going to go over to A1. And if I change this A1 to A3 or something, that's going to change it to match what's in A3. So that's the most simple form of indirect. That's not usually the way that you use it. The way that you usually use it, you're actually building this somehow. So you might build it with maybe a part number or something. Let me show you what I mean here. So I'm going to put in some numbers over here. I'm going to stick in 5, 3, 4, 2, 1, 6. All right. So I'm going to put in indirect and then in quotes, I'm going to put in a value here. I'm going to put in A for the column, ampersand, and then the cell reference is F1, and that's going to give me blue. So now what am I doing here? So I had just a number here. This could be a customer number, it could be a part number, it could be uh, last four digits of an extension, it could be almost anything. Uh, so now I'm saying indirect, take column A and then stick what you find on F1 on it. And the ampersand just concatenates it together. So this says A and F1. F1 is 5, so it's taking A and 5, so it says A5, indirect A5, and we go to A5. And this one we can copy down nicely. So this should be A5, which is blue. This one's A3, which is yellow. A1, which is red. A4, which is orange. And that's how indirect works. Okay, so what? How do you actually use this to the next level? The next level is actually random numbers. So I want to pick, say, a random color. And the random color I'm going to pick, so I'm going to use indirect again. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and just use indirect A and the rand between function, which has two parameters, 1 comma 6. So I'm asking it to give me a random number between 1 and 6. And it did. And I'll copy this down. If you don't know the random function, every time you touch a random function, it recalculates every random function. So these will change every time you change them. But this is the way you can generate random colors into the random numbers. If you've seen any of my videos that have like names and addresses and phone numbers and stuff, this is how I do it. I actually have I pulled a list of the top 100 first names, top 100 last names, top 100 street names, top 100 most popular zip codes, and I use this to randomly pull data inside of those functions. And that actually just lets me get as much random data as I want. I can show you data on the screen. There's no privacy concerns because these aren't real names, addresses, and phone numbers or anything like that. It's all purely random. All the numbers are just purely random with the rand between function. Uh, that's something that's actually really useful to do, especially if you're building test data or training data. If you're working with cases where you either don't have enough data or any real data potentially, or if you're working with cases where your data is protected in one way or another. For example, if you're working with health data, you can't share public health data, but you can make up all the data you want. And this is exactly the way that you do that. If you're interested in doing that, there's a link down in the description on how to actually use that. Also, it tells you there's another link in the description on more information on the indirect function. So before I go on, if you're getting anything from this video, If you want to see more of these videos, please do like and subscribe and hit notify. That tells YouTube, hey, this is a channel worth watching. It tells YouTube to like put it up so more people can see it, more people can find it. It really helps out with the algorithm. It really helps out with the YouTube creators like me because that tells us, hey, people are actually enjoying the content, keeps us motivated to keep going. If you can, I have a Patreon page also over at patreon.com/data analysis excellence. If you could help out there, just a few bucks a month, that would also be really great. So on to the next step. So the last piece of addressing really is data ranges. And data ranges can be a number of different things. You can have uh, a part of a column, you can have a part of a row, you can have a square matrix of row and column. You can do whole column, you can do whole row. Let me show you how these are done here. So we're going to do, actually use the VLOOKUP function here. It's one of the more useful functions. And the syntax on this, a video on this down in the description, but this is a really useful function, so I'll just like tease you with a little bit here. So we have VLOOKUP of A1, so I want to look for the thing in A, and my table array is going to be this. And you see it did A1 through C6, and that's the way it typed it in here, is A1 colon C6. And you can always pick the video, the ranges. You can pick the cells. So you can just go click on them. So you don't actually have to type them if you don't want to. And then column index is 3 because I want it to return the number, which is column 1, 2, 3. And false. Why is it false? False is exact match. It defaults to true, which is not exact match. Check out the VLOOKUP video if you want more details on that. And what that does is it tells me that um, when I look for red, that comes back at 1. Okay. So now if I copy this down, okay, so when I did this, everything worked great, right? Okay. So now what happens if instead of looking for um, A1, well, look for B1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's put B in here. Okay, and that came out fine. Okay, so what is this actually doing? This is a little bit trickier maybe. So what it's doing is I told it, go look for B1, which is green. Look in this big array here, and then go to column 3 on the line you find it and give me that result. And that gave me a 4. Okay, now I'm going to copy this down. And I get some errors. Well, why do I get the errors? Well, if you look here on the first error, it's now looking in A4 to C9. So the problem is, as it's going down, you see this range is also moving its way down. So the fix for that, as you probably guessed, is just to use absolutes here. So I'm going to use absolute addressing on that, and it copied down. And again, if you notice the colors in column D are changing, that's because that's with the random function. Okay, well that all works great. And now I add black as complementary color is white, and it's number 7, and didn't find it. Well, why isn't it finding it? Well, if you look up here, I'm still looking at A1 to C6. So this is where you can use entire columns or entire rows to fix that problem. So instead of doing $1 to C$6, you can just do A colon C. And that came up with the error because I don't have the other complementary color in here, of course. White, black. 8. Okay, here we go. So now as I add stuff down here, uh, I'm just using AC, so as I add colors, it'll just keep adding. It doesn't care how many I put in there. And if you noticed, it copied these down as well. That's because I was working in that column and Excel just tries to be helpful. 90% of the time it does what you want. 10% of the time you have to go back and delete some of the stuff it put in because it's wrong or meaningless in your case. So, so that's about it for a salad dressing. You have your normal ones are relative. As you copy the relatives, remember it'll adjust the values up and down, left and right across cells and columns. You have absolutes. Remember to put the dollar sign either in front of the letter, in front of the number, or both, depending on what you want to lock in place. Then you have uh, indirect addressing when you want to point to something else and say, it's over there, is where I want to go. And you have random addressing, which just involves putting random stuff into your indirect, which lets you pick, random colors, random planets, random whatevers. Uh, you also have the ability to pick individual cells, ranges, whole columns, whole rows. Can't do a whole sheet because there's not really much point in doing a whole sheet. And also there's no relative addressing between sheets. So you can't do, sheet one to sheet two and somehow get it to like increment. That it's not supported anywhere, at least at this point. And I can't really think of a use for it anyway. So, so that's about all I have for salad dressing. Like I said, it's a pretty simple topic. You can do a lot with it. The indirect and the random parts are the parts that most people haven't seen before. If you have questions, drop them down in the comments. If you like the video, please hit like and subscribe so that more people will find it. And I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks for stopping in.